Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. So glad you're here. Pick some previews on a Thursday, as we always do. Give us a thumb, subscribe, tell a friend. Bill, Wednesday, we did everything about Ohio State, Oregon that you could possibly do. So if you are tuning into this Thursday show and you're thinking to yourself, why are they literally not talking about the biggest Northern game of the year and the biggest game in college football this weekend? It's because we talked about it for like 90 minutes on Wednesday, right? Mm-hmm. If there's somebody here who wasn't here Wednesday, go back and watch that. They should watch it, right?
Pretty in depth. I would say the most in depth big game breakdown we have done thus far on KOTN.
I know what you wanted to say right there. You wanted to say too in depth. It was on the.
Oh no. I'll never say.
Okay.
No,
never. It's ball. Yeah. Ball. There's never too much ball. So go back and listen to that. I mean, if you don't want to watch that or listen to that today, like that's a good thing to save like Saturday morning. I think it's good for college football fans, Bill, right? You have something Saturday morning. Maybe you're out, you're running some errands on Saturday morning. You're getting a walk in, you're doing the laundry. You're at a farmer's market. You pop in the AirPods and you listen to a podcast, or you pop on the YouTube on your iPhone to get ready on Saturday for a Saturday night game. We accept you not consuming that until Saturday morning.
There's nothing better than shopping for artisan apple ciders while listening to an Ohio State Oregon preview that's 2 hours long.
Oh my God. I can't. There's no bye weeks when you cover the whole country, at least the northern part of it. But I feel like we need to squeeze in like an artisan apple cider segment at some point for you. So ball and artisan apple cider. 3 big game breakdowns on this show, though. We're going to pick every northern game. We're going to preview every northern game, but we're going to put special focus on 3. We're going to start with Colorado, Kansas State. We're also going to get to USC, Penn State, and Iowa State, West Virginia. And I guess like there's almost a little part of me in hindsight, Bill, that should we have done Iowa, Washington on the big game breakdown level, but we did just do Iowa last week. And both those teams have 2 losses. We're of course going to talk about it. It's going to be, I think, an incredibly interesting competitive football game, but I guess we're okay not doing big game.
I'm okay not doing a big game breakdown on a game that I think might feature 8 field goals. I think we're good with the 3 we chose.
8 field goal attempts. We don't even know if they're going to go in or not.
They're going to go in, yeah.
Okay. So I usually forget to go over our picks records at the top of the show, but I'm not going to forget this week because I was so good last week. And I'm going to remember. I went 14-2 last week. Bill went 10-6.
Yikes.
I hit everything. My only 2 losses for the week were we were both wrong on Boston College. Boston College lost to Virginia. And then I picked this Florida State upset over Clemson, which like blew my whole betting thing on the Friday Bets of the North. But everything in the North that we disagreed on, I was right. I picked Washington, you picked Michigan. I picked Minnesota, you picked USC. I picked Arizona State, you picked Kansas. I picked Syracuse, you picked UNLV. I picked Nebraska, you picked Rutgers. So I'm just saying.
I'd like
high in the show.
I was almost right on Syracuse losing.
Where I'll give you half a point for that.
And I was almost right on Kansas winning.
That is correct. So like that's a great almost week for 10-6 Bill Landis. The records for the year now, I am 118-22 and you are 110-30. So I have an 8-game lead through 6 weeks. So like you got, I don't think you have to do anything you don't actually think at some point, but in another couple of weeks, if this holds, you're going to have to start taking some swings.
Yeah, maybe 110-30 is not where you want to be when you're just picking winners, man.
Yeah.
We're not even doing the spread.
But there were some Minnesota USC, right? I mean, like there were some real upsets last week. Yeah. I mean,
there were a lot of them were late. Yeah.
We've had some exciting games. So anyway, we hope to have some exciting games this week. I think this one's exciting. And we'll start with our first big game breakdown. It's Kansas State at Colorado. It is not until 10:15 Eastern time on Saturday night. So this will be one where we are not going to be able to talk about it much on our Saturday postgame show, which will start, as a reminder, when the Ohio State-Oregon winner is determined. Either, that doesn't mean if it's 40-0 in the first half for one of the teams that we're going to start talking about it, will be either 11 p.m. Eastern, or we will wait until a winner is determined either by the game ending or by somebody being in complete control up 3 scores with 5 minutes left. So we want you there. We had a great audience last Saturday because Alabama lost to Vanderbilt and we were celebrating that. But now we want to do the other side. We want you here to celebrate and discuss intelligently and enthusiastically great Northern ball. And we also want you here to tell the South to cram it. So we've had some really good cram it postgame shows, but this is going to be like a wow Northern ball postgame show, I think, Landis, unless some stupid Southern team wants to go do something stupid, and then we'll at least acknowledge it.
Yeah, well, I'm actually very excited about the prospect of having a Northern banger to talk about while also always leaving the door open for some Southern crammage.
Just, crack the door for crammage on Kings of the North.
That's right.
4-point favored for Kansas State. We'll start with the Colorado offense versus the Kansas State defense. I do want to note, I threw out the COVID year because, I don't know, that's just a weird year. Every other year, Chris Kleiman, the Kansas State coach at Kansas State, is 1-4 after buys. Now, some of those, he's just played a good team after the bye, but it's kind of weird. And I don't think it's that Chris Kleiman lets his team take a nap during the bye week, and I think he's a good football coach. It's just probably weird enough to mention. Colorado offense, Kansas State defense, what do you got?
When do we start referring to Colorado's offense as balanced?
Oh,
and not just. I don't think we're there yet, but Colorado is creeping more towards that idea with the way that it has run the ball of late, and honestly, it's just the mere fact that it has run the ball, merely tried to run the ball, but it had a fairly balanced attack when it beat UCF last time out, which I was pretty impressed by. So I'm just kind of curious about that now. It was very much by committee the way that it ran the ball. I think it was 6 different players had carries in that game. No one really went nuts. There was kind of only one long run, but Colorado was running the ball well enough that I think you had to respect it, which is I think changes the dynamics greatly when you're facing this offense. And Kansas State is probably the most stout defense, at least in terms of just bodies up front, that Colorado has seen since it played Nebraska. So I think I'll probably repeat myself and say the thing I've said in a couple of games about Colorado, which is if teams feel like they can control the run without overcommitting to it, then I think obviously throwing the ball becomes a little more difficult for Colorado. But Kansas State, for all the things we like about it, has been susceptible to the pass this year. It's given up 20 pass plays of 20 yards or more, which ranks 106th in the country. And we know that Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter and LeJontay Wester and Jimmy Horn, they like to throw the ball down the field. So
they do. I
actually think even without a run game that has been improved for Colorado, I think there's going to be opportunities here for Colorado to throw the ball down the field, perhaps even with some consistency and certainly with some explosiveness against Kansas State.
Deion Sanders was sort of talking this week that I think they kind of wish they had Nebraska again because they think they're a better team. They're definitely in the "we told you so, we knew we would get here, we know ball" kind of thing. It is an interesting evolution of Colorado into a somewhat balanced, pretty competent football team. Now, that also happened against Colorado State. It happened in a legit miracle win against Baylor, which they get credit for, but it's not like they ran over Baylor for 60 minutes. And then they did handle their business against UCF last week. So am I a little on alert for Colorado being a little too happy about being competent and well-rounded? Yeah.
I am.
And I'm also on alert for, despite Chris Kleiman's 1-4 record after the bye, Kansas State just taking a week, and I think on both sides of the ball we might see the new Kansas State. So it's interesting that this game really matters for the Big 12 race, and they're both coming off a week to heal and prepare. So the Kansas State defensive coaching staff, though, must have been in the film room being like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Because again, this is Shedeur Sanders, and Shiloh Sanders on the other side of the ball is supposed to be back this week, by the way, at safety for Colorado. But Shedeur Sanders it's funny. I almost think if Travis Hunter wasn't on his team, Shedeur Sanders might be in the thick of the Heisman race, but all the Heisman juice justifiably is with Travis Hunter, who is now, again, when we were talking about Travis Hunter 4 weeks ago, he was 50-1. We were like, what are you doing? And now Travis Hunter is like basically the number 2 favorite in the Heisman race. But Shedeur is excellent. And he had for a while in the first couple games and much of last year been doing it by himself. But Shedeur Sanders with an actual run game now, Landis, like that is a really difficult offense to deal with, right?
It is, yeah. I'm just I am still a little hesitant to wrap my arms around the idea of Colorado having a reliable run game, but it has impressed me, right? Like I don't want to ignore the progress either. I think I'd feel a little better about it if there seemed to be like a reliable number 1 back emerging. Like to me, when you're doing it by committee, that just tells me you don't feel like you have really anybody who's all that good to do it or to handle the majority of the workload. And I still don't know that Colorado was a team that, if it gets into a situation where it has to run the ball to sustain drives kind of thing, is actually built to do that. I think what success it has found running the ball has been a byproduct of how fearful teams are of it throwing the ball, so that they're throwing this up the run, not the other way around, right? So I don't. It'll be interesting to see how Kansas State defends them. I can't imagine that Kansas State's going to come load up the box against Colorado and leave itself susceptible on the back end of its defense to a team that can throw the ball this way. And I am also wondering if the numbers on Kansas State's pass defense might be slightly misleading, only because the 2 teams that really threw it on them it was Tulane in a game that was back and forth. But the other was Oklahoma State, which kind of had to throw the ball because of how lopsided that game got kind of so quickly. So I don't know if that's necessarily a reflection of the quality of Kansas State's pass defense, but we're going to find out because we know Colorado is going to throw it. So if we're going to find out what is real and what's not, I guess, with Kansas State's pass defense this week.
By the way, just as a warning to everybody, no Oklahoma State talk this week on Kings of the North on Thursday. But if we were discussing it, apparently they're benching Alan Bowman. Reportedly, they are making a quarterback change, which is we had to talk about Alan Bowman for 3 weeks because they were preparing to lose to West Virginia, Kansas State, and Utah, and now they bench him. Thanks a lot, Mike Gundy. God, I talked about Alan Bowman was like the 7th most important person in my life for the last month. Awful. All right, let's go to the other side of the ball. Chris Kleiman talked that this week that obviously the DJ Giddens, he said, is the identity of Kansas State. And I think it is coming together offensively for Kansas State. He was 15 carries for 187 against Oklahoma State in the last game. Dylan Edwards, this is also a return for him. The transfer from Colorado, who transferred after the spring, has been a growing part of the offense. Both Edwards and Giddens average 5 yards after contact, which is they're both in the top 10 in the power conferences. Like they're both like physical tackle breaking runners. DJ Giddens is averaging 7.2 yards per carry, which is among power 4 running backs with at least 50 carries. That's 5th. He's awesome. And they're still rounding into form. And Avery Johnson is finally throwing the ball. So his first 4 games, he averaged 155 passing yards, and he threw for 259 against Oklahoma State in their last one. Their offensive line, it's kind of weird because they were all veterans who had been in the program. Kansas State's offensive line has 4 new starters. One of them is a transfer, Easton Kilty at left tackle from North Dakota. Everybody else was there. They just hadn't really started before. But Chris Kleiman was talking this week that he feels like, he said they're in, quote, they're an older group, but a new group together. And it has taken a little bit for those guys to gel. So I think as well as they've run the ball, they're still ascending in that regard. And Avery Johnson is a little bit figuring it out. So I think Kansas State's going to move the ball. Colorado's red zone D has been pretty good. 15 trips. They've only allowed, 21 trips. They've only allowed 9 touchdowns in the red zone. So I do like when Kansas State gets there, they have to punch it in. But I think as much as Colorado did a good job against UCF's rushing attack 2 weeks ago, I think we might be ready for something, Landis. And we have been sort of pushing back against a little bit the idea that the Big 12 is wide open and nobody knows what's going to happen, and thinking that actually Kansas State is maybe convincingly the best team. And I think they might convince other people of that with their balanced offensive performance that is wrapped around a dominant 3-headed run game with an offensive line that's getting it together. And I think we might see it.
I think we might too. Avery Johnson, I think, needs to throw the ball well in this game. Not because like it's just to keep building on it, right? You want to again, like make sure that is also real because he did it against Oklahoma State defense that isn't very good. Colorado stopping the run against UCF is noteworthy because UCF runs for 400 yards a game and Colorado held them under 200. Colorado was also up 3 scores fairly early in the third quarter, and KJ Jefferson had to throw the ball 35 times when his previous high was 22 times. So they kind of took UCF out of their game by getting up big. And I think if you put Kansas State into a throw game like that for me is still a question that Avery Johnson has to answer,
Sure.
right? I just don't know that that's going to happen here, barring turnovers, right? Part of the reason Colorado got up on UCF because UCF was turning the ball over a little bit, and Avery Johnson has thrown some picks. So there's a game state conversation here that I think could favor Colorado if Colorado can get up a couple scores and Kansas State feels like it has to throw the ball. But I'll bank on Kansas State probably playing cleaner than that coming off of some rest and a week off. And I think it will be able to run the ball just fine against Colorado's defense.
Avery Johnson had averaged 14 carries per game in the previous 2 games and only ran it 5 times against Oklahoma State. Like I think they got comfortable. They got up, they ran it with the backs. I think they fell into what they want to be, but also if it gets sideways, they can just tell Avery Johnson to be a crazy person, right? Which again, we talk about that there's multiple teams. There's what you want to be, and then there's what you are good at, and they have to be if the other thing doesn't work. So developing a pass game is great, but I don't think in this game, Kansas State, I think Colorado's going to put up a couple points, right? But
I do. Yeah.
Do you think Kansas State has to throw effectively to win? Or if Avery Johnson's having a bad game and Robert Livingston and the Colorado D has something for him, can they revert back to 3 dudes who are dangerous with the ball in their hands and Kansas State can win that way, just running?
I think Kansas State can win that way. It's just obviously a lessened your margin for error. And Colorado's defensive front has been pretty good. Like they made some additions there in the transfer portal, and I think it's working. Some of the defensive linemen have played well. They got Chidozie Nwankwo back against UCF. He's been a good player for them. BJ Green from Arizona State's played well. They have a linebacker, Nakai Hill-Green, who's a transfer from Charlotte, who used to play at Michigan, who's played quite well for them this year. So there are some guys in that front 7 that I think have legitimate talent and can present problems for anyone that Colorado plays. So I don't think Colorado or Kansas State's going to come out and steamroll this defense. But when you are talking about the kind of 3-pronged attack, you can get there running the ball with the 2 backs and with Avery Johnson. I think ultimately that'll be too much for Colorado to account for. But I don't know that I am viewing Colorado's defense a little differently. I just don't think it's the kind of pushover that it was in Deion's first year, and I think it's making some progress here over the last couple of weeks.
I'm worried that national sports shows who don't really know college football but want to talk about Deion aren't going to know what to say anymore, because Colorado is neither an incompetent joke nor a true national title contender. They're just a good team in a deep conference. And I don't know how that fits on First Take. So I feel bad for those guys.
It doesn't. Boring competency doesn't fit on First Take.
Yeah. It's like, you guys want to do 90 seconds on how Colorado's improved defense is going to deal with Avery Johnson. You guys want to do that? I don't know if they want to do that. So what do you got for the pick here, Landis?
I think both teams will move the ball and score. So I have 38-31 Kansas State. I think it's going to be a pretty awesome environment out in Boulder too. Like, people should be pretty fired up for this game. It is a real opportunity for Colorado to make a statement. I know they made one like out of the gate last year when it beat TCU, but it turned out that TCU wasn't all that good. Yeah. Kansas State is legitimately good, but I also think Colorado can beat them if the game goes a certain way. So this is a huge opportunity, but I just like the talent of Kansas State a little more, so I'm picking Kansas State.
Yeah, Statement the sequel.
Yeah,
it's real this time. Yeah, Deion can make sure. I do think they're just they're an improved football team, and maybe you love Deion, maybe you don't like Deion, but this would be a good game to watch just because it's going to be interesting football. So we have we have Ohio State, Oregon, and West Virginia, Iowa State are in that late window in prime time, and then this is the super late window. So you can watch those games when they end, come to the post-game show. We'll talk about stuff, but then you can watch the second half of Kansas State, Colorado, and I think you'll be entertained. So that would be our viewing guide. Do you agree with that? I mean, or at least have us on and have Colorado, like the second quarter of Colorado, Kansas State in the background.
Yeah, that's what split screen it.
Yeah, they're not going anywhere. It's fine.
Yeah.
You don't need to hear the people talk about what Shadur Sanders and Avery Johnson are doing. You can see it with your eyes, and then listen to us on the other thing. Okay. We're going to run through some other games now. The two other big game breakdowns we'll save for a little bit later in the show. These are like pretty good games that deserve a little extra time, but not as much as a big game breakdown. And we'll start with Pitt versus Cal, Landis. This is a 3:30 game. Pitt is a 3.5-point home favorite.
It is Pittsburgh Day at Acrisure Stadium. And to celebrate that and make people aware of it, I don't know if you saw this, they did a video with Pat Narduzzi where he walked into his office wearing a suit jacket. He took the suit jacket off and he replaced it with a sweater. And then he sat down on a chair and he changed the shoes, Mr. Rogers style. And then he said, I think he said, "See you Saturday, neighbor." And I was just surprised that Pat Narduzzi agreed to do something like that.
You know what I really think opened up Pat Narduzzi to letting down his guard and showing people who he really is? Being on Kings of the North.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
I think so.
We changed Pitt football. That's Mr. Rogers. He's holding the trolley car. Look at that. See, there's a little bit of Mr. Rogers in all of us, even in Pat Narduzzi, which maybe he didn't realize. Who knew?
Who knew?
Oh, have you been? I've been to the Mr. Rogers place over there, I think. Museum or something. I think I have.
I have not. No, I didn't know that was a thing. Yeah, lovely. I should. Yeah, okay. My wife is from Pittsburgh. She loves Mr. Rogers.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, Pat Narduzzi letting his hair down. And maybe they filmed that earlier in the season. I don't know, but it was released this week. Either way, Pitt is looking to start 6-0 for the first time since 1982. Eli Holstein is looking to be he is the first Pitt quarterback to win his first 5 starts since Dan Marino. Not a bad comparison.
Oh my God.
Eli Holstein. It's kind of crazy, right?
I mean, no offense to Kenny Pickett and I don't know anybody else you would like. Could Eli Holstein wind up as the second greatest quarterback in Pitt history? The trajectory. I mean, anyway, not to put that on Eli too early, but yeah, okay.
He certainly could be. Cal played that exciting yet ultimately disappointing game against Miami last week. So I'm envisioning Cal perhaps being a little flat in this one, and Pitt I think being a little fired up here. So Cal's defense is pretty good, or had been pretty good, especially against the pass, and then Miami kind of threw it all over them. Again, Miami had to because Miami was down, I think 4 scores. But I think Pitt can probably throw it on Cal as well, and it's a long trip, so I think Pitt wins fairly comfortably here.
So I don't know if people can tell. We split up the games, and then if it's your game, you're in charge of doing kind of more research, and the other person comments. I wrote down 4 words for Pitt-Cal because it was your game. Cal out of juice.
Yeah.
I don't even know. Are people at Cal tweeting this week? Are they even tweeting? No one's talking about it anymore. I know Cal Twitter took over the world. I think they're out of tweet. They stayed up until 4:00 in the morning and they blew a game. And now they fly to Pittsburgh. I only -3.5. The thing that you don't want to do when you're sad and tired and out of Twitter jokes is try to stop Des Reed and Eli Holstein. I do not think they're going to be in the mood for that.
I don't think they are either. I do think Eli Holstein needs to be careful. He has 9 turnover-worthy plays, and Cal leads the country with 11 interceptions. It picked off Auburn 4 times when it won down there. And Auburn stinks. I'm not saying that Pitt and Auburn are necessarily comparable, but Mr. Turnover-worthy play just needs to chill out a little bit, I think, in this game.
Listen, man. Are they turnovers?
No, they're just worthy.
They're just worthy of them. That's fine. What a schedule. Cal football, just sitting there doing nothing for 100 years. Then they play Auburn, Miami, and Pitt in the first half of a season. What a crazy world.
Yeah.
I think they're going to get their doors blown off by Mr. Rogers. Oh, my God. It's a beautiful day in the Nardog hood, a beautiful day to be Nardogs. Won't you be mine? Won't you be mine? All right, let's do Washington, Iowa.
You should send those lyrics to EJ Borghetti, Pitt Sports Information Director, because there's something there, I think.
There is a lot. Oh, yeah. Washington, Iowa. I do not know what to make of this. It's a noon Eastern start. Iowa's a 3-point favorite at home. We both picked Pitt, by the way. Did we say that? 35-17 for me, 28-17 for you over Cal.
Yep.
Sorry. I think Iowa fans want to play a new quarterback, and I don't think Kirk Ferentz does yet. Brendan Sullivan came in at the end of the Iowa-Ohio State game and ran a little bit, and in a kind of a dead game helped lead a touchdown drive against Ohio State's backups. But there is a lot of chatter about just having a quarterback who's a little bit of a run threat and what that might do for this offense. And I don't even know that the Iowa fans and the media who are talking about this, I don't even know that they necessarily think Brendan Sullivan is better than Cade McNamara. He might just be different than Cade McNamara. Yeah. And that might be enough. And if it's well, there's no passing game. Ohio State could key on Caleb Johnson. Well, if your quarterback can scoot a little bit, at least that's something. Do you want to guess Cade McNamara in his career, his time at Michigan and Iowa, what his career rushing total is?
78 yards.
Minus 67. So
minus 67. Okay.
So sacks in college football count against a quarterback's run total.
Yeah.
So that's it. So he was positive at Michigan. So he's actually minus 67 for his career, minus 70 for his Iowa career. Brendan Sullivan has run for 282 yards in his career between Northwestern and Iowa. He did have 8 games at Northwestern where he ran the ball at least 10 times when he started for the Wildcats. It would be something. And I am very curious if Tim Lester and Kirk Ferentz might at least be open to more Brendan Sullivan in drives, give him a series, split series. If he looks good, ease into it. Mm-hmm. So I think this is a fascinating game. I do not have a great handle on it because Washington had a huge win last week against Michigan. But I do feel like we've talked about this a lot, sort of there are teams who play a type of team and then it's okay, well, at least I'm not playing them. So Washington, I think, has a very dangerous offense. But I think Iowa thinks, well, at least we're not playing Ohio State. Mm-hmm. So whatever Washington does, Ohio State does a little bit better. But Washington does a lot really well. But I don't think Washington's going to come in and drop 40 on Iowa. So I think it's a game in the 20s, Bill. And I think that means that Iowa doesn't have to do a ton offensively because they can rely on their defense, but they have to do more than they've done. They scored 19 against Iowa State. That wasn't enough. They got shut out against Ohio State's first team defense. That wasn't enough. 3 touchdowns might do it here for Iowa. And I'm curious how open they are to changing things up to try to get there.
I think they really need to, because you have to have something else that even minorly threatens a team. And it's not the passing attack, and Cade McNamara can't run. So, and teams are just going to keep throwing 10 defenders at your run game because that's all you can do. So they need to do it. Whether or not Kirk Ferentz's stubbornness will allow them to, I guess we'll see. I think Washington might play a little flat here, coming off of a huge emotional win against Michigan and then having to travel. So that's part of my score here as well. And I'm not convinced just because of one game that Washington has put all of its penalty, red zone, and special teams issues behind it. And if you're bringing that to Iowa City, I don't think you beat Iowa if you're playing that way. So
yeah, that's real.
Washington can prove me wrong. That'd be fine. But Kyle Monangai ran on him pretty well. Donovan Edwards still ran on him a little bit last week, even though Washington won that game. I think Caleb Johnson can still find some success here, and I think Iowa wins a typical Iowa game, 21-20.
We're right in the same range. I have Iowa 23-21. Again, Iowa's favored by 3. So this is both of us taking Washington with the points, whatever that means. But we think it's close. But Iowa can't score 7 and win, no matter how good their defense is. So I'll be curious. I'll be curious how Iowa gets to 20. So We'll see how that works. All right. Wisconsin, Rutgers. This is another noon start. It's at Rutgers. Rutgers is minus 2.5 points against the Badgers, Landis.
They are doing a Scarlet out at SHI
Hey.
Stadium. I'll be curious to see what the crowd's like for that a noon start against Wisconsin. But we'll see. It's a homecoming for Phil Longo, which I didn't know. Phil Longo, New Jersey native from Red Bank, not too far from Piscataway, and got his career started as a New Jersey high school coach.
Everybody's from Jersey.
Everybody is from Jersey. That is true.
Okay.
But I want to talk about Tretch Kekahuna.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah. So I remember in the offseason reading some stuff about, and I was I was keyed in on it because I know like you were talking to Luke Fickell and like they were excited about their skill.
Yeah.
And obviously that didn't really pan out to start this season, but it seemed like a guy or the guy that people thought might unlock something different was Tretch Kekahuna, who's a second-year redshirt freshman who had a pretty nice bowl game, and people were expecting him to build off of that, and then like just didn't do much of anything until last week against Purdue. Well, it's against Purdue, comes with the proper context. They were giving him jet sweeps. They were throwing him the ball. He had 134 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was Big Ten Freshman of the Week. And now I want to know if he can become a bit of a go-to guy for Wisconsin's offense, which has been searching since Luke Fickell has been there for a reliable offensive playmaker. And Will Pauling is very good. I think it would help him if he could get some help. He was hurt in that game against Purdue, but was practicing this week. So it sounds like Will Pauling will play against Rutgers. And if you get a second receiver to go with them, like, I don't know, maybe Wisconsin can salvage a little something offensively. Rutgers defense is very good. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but it was interesting to me that a playmaker started to emerge perhaps for Wisconsin last week against Purdue. Or maybe it was just that we're playing Purdue and none of this is real kind of game. But I think maybe that was something to pay attention to.
I do think everybody has to be a little bit careful about not overreacting to last week. And what Wisconsin did to Purdue, was that Wisconsin figuring it out with Braden Locke and he threw for 300 plus, or was that just that's how bad Purdue is? And Rutgers losing, well, they were right there. They had some weird stuff go against them at Nebraska. They only lost by 1 score. They actually hit a couple decent big plays, and Nebraska's defense is pretty good. So I actually think like this probably gets back to reminding people that Rutgers is pretty darn good and Wisconsin still has some issues. So I have 24-16 Rutgers in a low scoring game, a defensive game, but kind of, I think for Rutgers, like an 8-point win is fairly convincing. Actually, it's like 2 scores. So like, I think Rutgers kind of takes care of business here.
I think so too. I don't, for all the nice things I said about Wisconsin's offense and Tretch Kekahuna, I am not believing in any of it because Purdue's awful. I think they regress to what they actually are. Rutgers defense is too good. They run the ball. I think it's going to be a low scoring kind of defensive game because that's usually what Rutgers plays. But I have Rutgers winning 17-14, and I think they just kind of shut down Wisconsin's offense. And Kyle Malunga gets back to running the ball. He got kind of held in check a little bit last week against Nebraska, so they got to get him going again. But I think they will.
Speaking of Purdue, another noon game. Illinois hosting Purdue. The Illini favored by 23. Believe it or not, Purdue has won 4 straight in this rivalry, and they do play for a cannon. And Brett Bielema, the Illinois coach, was talking this week that he's mad he doesn't have the cannon. He said our trophy case is kind of empty.
He needs a cannon. That's a guy
he
who
wants a cannon. Yeah. So I mean, now I kind of want a cannon. I guess they don't have cannons. Well, like, can you have a cannon? As Knights didn't. Did Knights have cannons? Did they have cannons? Like in the 1500s? I don't think so.
I don't know when the cannon was invented.
Yeah, I'm sure someone will tell
I'll
us.
look that up while you're talking about Purdue.
So Purdue has dominated the rivalry, but has not dominated anybody this year. Purdue's going to wear, Illinois at home is just doing a lot of stuff this year for a 100-year celebration. They're going to wear their 4-star helmets, which is from the Dick Butkus years, which is kind of cool. Brett Bielema is 0-3 against Purdue, and I do like that. So Ryan Walters, in his first year at Purdue last year, everybody knows Ryan Walters was the defensive coordinator at Illinois and then got the Purdue job and beat Illinois and Brett Bielema last year. And so like they've already gone through all that stuff, but I sort of was maybe thinking that like, okay, well, maybe this is one of those where Brett knows his guy is struggling a little bit and doesn't want to, wallop them too bad. And then I saw some quote that Brett Bielema was like, yeah, I've had a bunch of guys be head coaches, but like, you love them, but what are you going to do? So I was like, oh, okay, no, I don't know. No, I don't think they're going to take it easy. So I don't see the Purdue free fall stopping now. So I have 35-7 Illinois.
The Chinese were started using gunpowder weapons in the 10th century, and then the cannon appeared in Europe beginning in the 12th century.
Oh, so nightside cannons. Okay.
Yeah. And Illinois is going to get one too. I have 42-17.
Yeah, Brett Bielema is going to be so happy that he has his cannon. All right, Northwestern, Maryland. What do you got for that, Bill? This is Friday, 8 p.m., night. So it's a Friday night game. Get excited. Maryland favored by 10.5 at home.
So I want to read you this quote because I just think it's hilarious. Maryland against Indiana saw Ty Felton, Caden Prather, both their top two receivers, and safety Dante Trader leave the game with injuries. And because coaches are paranoid, this is what Mike Locksley said about 3 very important players being injured and their availability for this game. 2 of the 3 have practiced. We have 2 days left this week, and we'll see how the one that hasn't practiced, how he manages it. It's hard to say he's out yet. Leaving and then it goes through. I really don't know if the third guy can go until I go back over to the football facility. And he would not name the guys he was talking about. He just said 2 of them are good, one of them still hurt. I'm not going to tell you which one it is. I think the line is probably reflective of Ty Felton being one of the guys who will be available, because if he wasn't, I just can't imagine Maryland being a double-digit favorite over anybody. But it could be that Maryland is without one of Ty Felton, Caden Prather, or Dante Trader in this game, which I suppose is something to keep in mind as you're analyzing this one. Northwestern should have Cam Porter back at full strength. He came back from injury last week, and then he only had 6 carries. I think he was a pretty limited workload, but David Brown said he's full go this week. So, Cam Porter, Jack Lausch, I think could present some interesting offensive challenges with the way that the 2 of them are able to run the ball. But I think it's probably a game where Billy Edwards, assuming he has Ty Felton, can probably throw the ball as successfully as they have for most of this year. So I have Maryland winning 35-21 because I just don't think Northwestern has enough offense to keep up with Maryland.
I do have it closer. I have Maryland 24-20. Northwestern did play its best offensive game last week. 24 points was its most of the season. 336 yards was its most of the season. I do think the loser of this game probably is not making a bowl. So this does really matter. Maryland is 3-2. Northwestern is 2-3. Maryland's remaining schedule after this is USC at Minnesota, at Oregon, Rutgers, Iowa, at Penn State. So if they're not 4-2, I don't know where you find 3 wins of those final 6. And then Northwestern is 2-3. They've still got at Iowa, at Michigan, and Ohio State and Illinois. So they have Purdue. They have probably 2 other winnable games, but they probably need to be 3-3. So this really matters. That really matters to those 2 programs to be bowl teams. Mike Locksley was also talking in their off week about that he was watching other games and nobody talked about Billy Edwards. He was kind of mad. Billy Edwards is 14th in the nation and in 289 passing yards per game. So that's good. That's a good way to nobody talked about your guy. Go tell your guy that nobody talked about him. 11 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He's playing really well. I just think if the Northwestern offense is rounding into not horribleness, then I think it's a game. Because then I think it's 2 pretty good defenses. And, Billy Edwards is good, but I think if you have Cam Porter and Jack Lausch is finding himself a little bit, then I think it's a 1-score game potentially. But also, if Ty Felton was back and they're doing their thing, it might be a blowout. So 24-20 Maryland. We're both picking the Terrapins.
Yeah, Maryland, by the way, is seeking to avoid its first 0-3 start in Big Ten play since 2015. So it's been a while since they've started this poorly in conference.
It's funny. I mean, I was very much on alert for a huge Maryland step back, but so much of that was related to their quarterback play. And actually, they're getting great quarterback play, but they also have to make sure they're still winning games with it. So 3-2 is actually, 3-2 is a good start for them. They had the Virginia game they easily could have lost, and they found a way to win that. So the Michigan State loss, right? That's a close one. Michigan State wins in the end. So we get it. I mean,
in Indiana, we've talked, Indiana turned the ball over 4 times, and Maryland didn't do anything with it, right? That's a different game if Maryland's more opportunistic there. So they're 3-2, but I think have played slightly better than that.
Yeah, I think 3-2 with competitive losses is better than I expected for Maryland. So this is a little bit of a key game for both these folks both these teams if they want to do something this season. Okay. Quick break. When we come back, more big game breakdowns. We'll be starting with Penn State USC. next on Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis back on Kings of the North, reminding you again, if you want to give us a thumbs up, that would be fantastic. If you want to subscribe, that would be great. If you want to tell a friend about Kings of the North, man, we would appreciate that. And so would Mr. Rogers. Penn State offense versus USC defense, Landis. That's what we'll start with this big game breakdown. Andy Kotelnicki taking it to the West Coast. This is a 3:30 game. Penn State is a 5-point road favorite, Bill. Is Drew Aller going to go throw all over the USC defense?
I don't know about that. This is Andy Kotelnicki, by the way, against Danton Lynn, who's a former Penn State defensive back.
Oh, yeah.
He and I think, actually were at school together there when he was there. He's an excellent defensive coordinator. I think has done a lot to improve USC's defense, but USC still can't stop the run, and that I think is a ripe opportunity for Penn State, which is getting Nick Singleton back for this game. Didn't have him last week against UCLA, and Penn State didn't really run the ball all that well last week against UCLA either. I think it gets back to that. It was over 200 yards every game before last week against UCLA when UCLA held them under 100. I like this rushing attack. I like both the running backs, Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen, and USC. Minnesota ran it on them. Michigan ran it on them. It was a lot of big plays, but nonetheless, it still rushed for almost 300 yards in that game. And now USC is going into this game without Eric Gentry, who is its best defensive player as linebacker and the highest graded run defender in the country among Power 4 linebackers. So you are plucking your best run defender out of a defense that has already struggled to stop the run against a team that I think is still one of the better rushing attacks in the country. So I don't think much of that sets up all that well for USC, obviously. But the passing is interesting. Like I think USC will load up against the run and like make Drew Aller prove that he can, or try to make it a game where Drew Aller has to prove that he can throw it to beat a team. Drew Aller started the year pretty well. I think after 3 games, he was leading the country in yards per attempt. He was like almost like 13 yards per attempt, which is pretty crazy, especially compared to what he was last year.
Yeah.
It was 6.5 yards against Illinois. It was 9.9 against UCLA. So there's a drop off there. And this is his progression from game 1 through last week against UCLA in average depth of target: 13.2, 11.9, 12.3, 6, 8.6. They have regressed a little bit in how they're throwing the ball down the field, which I think is less a reflection of Drew Aller, who I do think has made progress, and more confirmation that Penn State, I don't think, has taken much of a step forward at receiver. I don't think Trey Wallace has been as good as people were expecting him to be, or at least as consistent. Omari Evans has been very boom or bust. Liam Clifford had a big game last week, but that was kind of the first time we've seen it. And Julian Fleming hasn't done a whole lot for this offense, at least in terms of receiving production. Tyler Warren is still very much their most dangerous receiving threat, and he's very good. Yeah. But if the tight end is kind of the best thing you got, then I don't know that I view you as much of a dangerous throwing team. So I think if USC can do something here to try to stifle this rushing attack and make it a game where Penn State has to throw it, then USC has a shot to win. If it can't stop the run, then I don't think USC is going to win. But I don't know if Penn State's passing game is where it needs to be, or at least not where I thought it was going after what we saw in the first 3 games.
Yeah. I mean, that West Virginia game, they hit Trey Wallace on a big throw over the middle, catch and run. They had the play at the end of the first half where they kind of chuck it up to Omari Evans and he makes a play and sets up a field goal. And it was like, okay. And even within that idea, they are who they are. There's not all-American, all Big Ten type receivers on that team. But, is Andy Kotelnicki going to scheme them open? And there's enough of a run threat that all of a sudden you get guys in the box and now you can hit some guys. And if it's not that, I wonder It's, I mean, probably not, right? I think James Franklin means it when he says they need to be more explosive and that kind of thing. But also, it can be easy. Like the non-conference, you got to do what you got to do. You're on the road at West Virginia. Let's go. It turns out West Virginia's secondary is a huge problem, and that it showed up against Penn State. But then you get in the Big Ten, and it's like, whatever we got to do to win, And it's like maybe it's harder to be spreading your wings and embracing a new way of doing stuff when it's like, hey, let's just score 20 and lean on our defense and get out of here with a victory. And if you are going to take the next step, you've got to be more than that. And I was asking Audrey Snyder, who he had on this week, the great Penn State writer, if Penn State's down in a second half, can they throw to win? If USC comes out, Landis, and hits some stuff, and the middle of the third quarter, it's 24-10 USC. Is Penn State dead? Or can they come out and do some things? You probably got to throw to come back there.
I don't think I'd love the idea of Penn State being down 2 scores against the. I think USC. I don't think USC is a great team. I think USC is probably a good team. But I don't like
USC might be a bad road team and a pretty decent home team at this point.
Yeah, maybe that's it. So no, I wouldn't love that scenario. I don't think Penn State can throw its way back into a game. It could perhaps explosive run its way back into a game because Nick Singleton and Katron Allen are very good, and they do some really creative stuff with Tyler Warren. So maybe you can still unlock some explosive plays to make up that gap. Maybe I'm being a little too down on it at the moment, but I just don't. It's been a question for years now with Penn State. I don't think the receivers are where they need to be. It's interesting. Like James Franklin a couple weeks ago said, oh, you guys aren't writing enough about how improved our receiver play has been. And since then, it's been kind of bad. I think that was after the Kent State game, maybe. And since then, I don't think it's been very good. Trey Wallace in his last 3 games has 9 catches for 113 yards. And that's supposed to be your number 1 receiver. It's not there. So that position still worries me if Penn State were to get into a game where that should matter. And maybe this one won't be that, but I think against the Ohio States of the world and beyond, it could matter.
Let me give you a stat about number 1 receivers, by the way. Last week against Minnesota, USC receivers Zachariah Branch and Jacoby Lane had 13 targets, 5 catches, and 23 yards in a Lincoln Riley offense. Jacoby Lane had 100 yards receiving the week before and said something. I guess he caught a bunch of slants, and he referenced Michael Thomas, the former Ohio State and Saints receiver, who I guess people call the slant god. And Michael Thomas retweeted him, and Jacoby Lane was all excited. And then he came out and had 2 for 13. Lincoln Riley, what are you doing, man? What is happening? I guess they threw it to some other guys, but those are the 2 guys who lead your team in targets. I don't know where USC is offensively right now. So and this Penn State defense, again, I think is progressing from good to maybe potentially getting to elite. I think the USC run game is okay. Penn State's defense does lead the nation in stuff rate, which is how often you shut down a run, you hold a run to 0 yards or less. They're number 1 in that. They're number 5 in havoc rate defensively. Penn State is, which is big plays, tackles for losses, pass breakups, that kind of thing. Audrey talked about she thinks there is some questions about the linebacker play. I think Tony Rojas has 9 missed tackles this year, that kind of thing. I think there's some stuff there, but I think the corners, AJ Harris and Jalen Kimber, the transfers from Georgia and Florida, are playing pretty well. They are missing KJ Winston, but at safety, but they still have 2 good safeties. And up front, Denai Dennis Sutton, Abdul Carter, and Zane Durant is a really good defensive line. And I think Abdul Carter's figuring it out. The first couple weeks, Landis, right? I think he wasn't as disruptive as some people like you, who picked him to lead the nation in sacks, expected. But I think he's figuring it out, and I think they're figuring out using him and the multi-position thing. And I think he's mostly an edge guy most of the time. And USC's tackles give up pressure. Elijah Page and Mason Murphy are both in the top 20 among power conference tackles in most pressures allowed. So I do think Penn State's defense can get after Miller Moss in this. I do think USC will not be able to run the ball very well. And I do think it's possible that for all the stuff that is really important about Penn State's offense when it comes to taking another step as a team overall and being a team that's more than just slide into the playoff and lose the first round, for this game against USC, it might just be Abdul Carter chasing Miller Moss around the place and Penn State not having to do a ton offensively because Penn State shuts down USC.
I think that's it. I think USC's offensive line stinks. So I like they couldn't block.
I have a bunch of stats. It's like power 4 tackle pressure rate, and you're like, their offensive line stinks. I love you, brother.
They couldn't block Minnesota. They had a hard time blocking Michigan. They will have a hard time blocking Penn State. I suppose if I'm wrong about that, and Miller Moss has time to throw the ball, like Jacoby Lane, I think is 6'4", and Deuce Robinson is 6'6". Like those are just tough guys to defend. If Miller Moss has time to throw the ball. He didn't have a ton of time to throw the ball against Minnesota, and I just don't think he'll have a ton of time to throw the ball here against Penn State. So it's odd to think this of a Lincoln Riley offense, but I just don't know that it's going to be able to do much against this Penn State defense. I want to ask you though. So we talked on the Ohio State Oregon preview about some of the travel stuff and the trends with that.
Yeah.
So Penn State is a little weird because of their runway airport stuff. Like they had to drive to Harrisburg, and because they had to drive to Harrisburg, it's like an hour and a half to get there. They left on Thursday, and they're doing their walkthrough at SoFi Stadium on Friday. And it's just a thing that James Franklin has been talking about since the summer.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the travel stuff is a bit overblown, especially when it's east to west and it's only happening sporadically. But it seems like it's on the mind of Penn State in a way that I do find mildly concerning. Like, I wonder if there's anything distracting about the disruption in the process for Penn State here, because for Ohio State, for instance, isn't being super disruptive to its process when it's going out to Oregon. It's leaving on Friday. It's doing most of its Friday normal stuff that it would do for a normal road game still in Columbus before it leaves. And Penn State has really, I think, disrupted what they're doing prior to this game, because I think James Franklin is obsessed with their airport runway length and just is a little consumed by the idea of having to travel to the West Coast. So I actually am far more concerned about that dynamic with this game than I am the Ohio State Oregon game.
See, I wonder if I think I might be pro Thursday travel, that I maybe would rather get there and settle in, and even if it's disruptive, your body has more time to adjust. Then I don't know. I obviously and teams are going to win and lose doing both. Mm-hmm. But a year from now, when we're at Big Ten Media Days and we're talking to coaches about this kind of thing, I wonder if there will be a travel consensus that we'll have built up, where it's do what you always do versus adjust and give your body more time. So I do think a lot of this, you are right in, the more you think about it, the more it has a chance to be something. You're kind of manifesting the idea that travel matters, right, because you're talking about it constantly. So I don't know what the right answer is, but I also think it's possible that the long run, the runway deal and having to leave early, allows Penn State to settle in a way that maybe Ohio State, trying to be normal, they'll be like, we were kind of sluggish to start against Oregon because we did, I don't know. Also, Oregon's better than USC, so I think even if Abdul Carter's a little thrown off, he still might tear Miller Moss's arms off.
Yeah, that is true. And there's going to be a lot of information gathering about best practices for this stuff this year. So I don't want to say one way is definitively better than the other. I just wish James Franklin didn't talk about it so much. Then maybe I'd feel a little better about it.
Yeah, he just whatever. He wants a bond issue passed to lengthen the runway or whatever. I don't know what. That's just, like I said, it's I got asked about. I was on an Oregon radio show on Thursday morning, and I got asked about that. It's maybe 150 years ago, you shouldn't have built your giant state university in between mountains, because someday you would have wanted a longer runway when you're in a football conference with a team in California. So if they had built Penn State in downtown Philadelphia, this wouldn't be an issue. I don't know. I can't. Part of me is also, I've made the drive from State College to Harrisburg all the time. It's just through farmland. It's lovely.
It's not that bad. Yeah. It'd be a pain if it were snowing, but it's not. So it's fine.
Yeah. It's not snowing.
It's never going to snow again. We're
no,
good.
That's right. All right. So what are our picks? What do you have for this Penn State USC game, Landis?
I have 31. So, we're pretty similar. I have 31-17. I do think that Penn State's going to be able to run it and kind of do its thing, and USC is not going to be able to keep up. I do have concerns about Penn State's passing game, but just not in this matchup. So I think running it is good enough here.
I don't like where USC is, and I do think they're substantially better at home, but I don't. I kind of don't know what Lincoln Riley's doing. Remember when this guy was one of the best 5 coaches in the country? Everybody said, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what this is. So I just think I think it's the Penn State defense takes care of business here. And even this 31, we have 31 for Penn State for both. I mean, that's a decent point total. I can see some short fields, like maybe 2 turnovers. Maybe a defensive score or something. Again, that game turned last week. USC loses to Minnesota because Ja Joyner from Minnesota beats a tackle, gets a strip sack. Minnesota gets a short field and drives and goes ahead. So like that, I think all of that is on the table here. And as much as I said USC is a better home team, they also looked terrible last time they were home against Wisconsin and then blew them out in the second half. But a lot of that was like out-athleting Wisconsin in a way they aren't going to out-athlete Penn State. So I don't like this. I don't like USC here at all. And I do like the Penn State defense first and foremost. Okay, we're in agreement on that. Let's do another big game breakdown. Really excited for this game, Landis. I kind of wish this was not on at the same time as Oregon, Ohio State. So this is Iowa State, West Virginia. It's at West Virginia. Iowa State is a 3-point road favorite. Saturday night, 8 p.m. So it starts half an hour after Ohio State, Oregon. So it should be, if they're both close games, they shouldn't be ending at the exact same time. But have both on, watch both. This really matters for the Big 12 race. Iowa State's undefeated. Iowa State, you talked about it with Pitt. Well, Pitt was trying to go 6-0 for the first time since when? Do you remember what you said?
82. Yeah.
Iowa State's trying to go 6-0 for the first time since 1938. So this is real stuff. And apparently, I read a good story about this, that like Matt Campbell just became the all-time coaching wins leader at Iowa State, and was like, whatever. Like he didn't make a big deal about it. He actually, I guess, does make a big deal about this, that Iowa State in 133 seasons has never won a conference championship. Jalen Noel said this week, Campbell says it every day, 133 years. We honestly haven't won anything here at Iowa State, but the teams in the past have allowed us to get to this point. We appreciate them and we've learned from them. We just want to remind ourselves every day that it's been 133 years and nobody's ever done it. And why not us to be the team to go do it now? Dang, man. 133 years. That's a long time. Guess what Iowa State might need to do to break that streak? Win this one. Yep. I think it's a scooch short of a must-win for Iowa State because they do end the year with Utah and Kansas State. And if they lose this one and they win those two, I think a one-loss. I don't think there's going to be 6 one-loss teams in the Big 12, right? I think if you have one conference loss, you're going to the Big 12 title game, especially if you beat Kansas State and Utah at the end. But this really, 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 really matters. And we keep reminding people, West Virginia has 2 losses. They're both non-conference. They are right there in the Big 12 race. It's just that if West Virginia doesn't win the Big 12, they're not going to the playoff. Right. But they still could go win the Big 12. So, Landis, this is a gigantic game, is it not?
It's a huge game. It's going to be an awesome environment at night in Morgantown. It's going to be, Iowa State's going to have to earn it, right? I think for as much as we've talked about the struggles of West Virginia's defense, I think the environment will help it here a little bit, like maybe make up for some of those shortcomings. Rocco Beck is playing against West Virginia on the day that West Virginia is honoring his dad, Anthony Beck, for being inducted into the West Virginia Athletics Hall of Fame. So that's interesting. I think
they must have timed that up. They must have done that on purpose, huh?
I think Rocco might be a little amped up for that, and I think he perhaps maybe needs to be careful about not being too amped up because of that. So that's an interesting subplot to this. I don't know. West Virginia's pass defense has been improved the last couple of games, and was reading some stuff about some guys like being pretty confident about the progress that it has made. It is interesting to me that, like Neil Brown said, we're going to shake some things up in the secondary, and they swapped out their starting corners when they played Kansas. Yeah, but then they swapped them back when they played Oklahoma State. Oh. So I don't know if they've necessarily found what they're looking for, even if the sheer passing production of their opponents has dropped down from what it was when they gave up a 300-yard game to Albany and a 300-yard game to Pitt, and Penn State had some explosive passing plays too. So like that's been better. And it was against Kansas, which is having real struggles doing anything on offense, and Oklahoma State, which, statistically has been a good passing offense, but I think you and I both agree isn't very good. So I don't know that question's been answered, right? And I don't know that West Virginia has the guys in the secondary to line up with Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll for 4 quarters and shut those guys down. So I think West Virginia might be able to stop the run a little bit here. Iowa State's run game has not been all that impressive. It's again another team that's done it by committee. They have 3 guys with 40 carries, and all 3 of them are like between 200 and 300 yards. Abu Sama has not really broken out to be the kind of star we thought he might be this year. Jalen Jackson, as we discussed earlier in the week, did have a nice game last week against Baylor, but I don't know if that's a wholly reliable part of Iowa State's offense yet. So it could be rendered a little one-dimensional in this game, but that dimension's pretty good. and the receivers are pretty good. And the weakness of West Virginia, I think, is still stopping the pass. So I think that's still where Iowa State can win the game, but I think it will be a challenge just because of the circumstances of the game, less so about the matchups. But I think that, like I said, that the environment might help West Virginia make up for some of that.
Yeah, I mean, Noel and Higgins are both been awesome, right? They're both over 400 yards receiving for the year, but I still am even waiting. I think there's even more there.
Yeah,
and
I think so too.
Like who's the best passing offense in the Big 12? Is it Iowa State? I mean, I guess it's Colorado. It's Colorado 1, Iowa State 2.
Yeah, I actually don't know statistically. I would just say based off the personnel, I would probably say Colorado 1. Yeah, and
then Arizona's somewhere in there with Noah Fifita and Tetro McMillan, but also Arizona stinks. So I don't know. This is quite a deal. Like, this is when you think about the wins that West Virginia has, it's like righted the ship. That's Jalen Daniels and Alan Bowman, and now it's Rocco Becht. So like that is it gets real this week again, and Drew Aller threw on them, Eli Holstein threw on them. So okay, you have to be prepared for Iowa State to throw on you. On the other side of the ball, the West Virginia offense versus the Iowa State defense. We've been talking about Garrett Green a ton. In the Penn State game, he had no scrambles first week of the year. None. He did not run after he dropped back. The last 2 weeks against Kansas and Oklahoma State, he had 12 total scrambles for 124 yards. He is killing defenses with his legs after things break down. And that is incredibly important for the West Virginia offense. And you noted this on the Monday show, like Jaheim White is here.
Yeah.
Jaheim White in the first 3 power conference games for West Virginia, 27 carries for 94 yards. Last game against Oklahoma State, 19 carries, 158 yards. So Garrett Green, his wheels are moving. Jaheim White, they've unlocked him. I don't even know how well they have to throw it. And this is, I keep forgetting. I said it again the other day. It's like, who do we say is dunks and threes? West Virginia's offense is dunks and threes. That's one of the other things that we say, that it's like, just run the ball or take deep shots. And the average depth of target for Garrett Green in the first 2 games was less than 10 yards. That's too low for him. It's been over 13 yards per attempt the last 3 games. So they got back to it. And again, if this West Virginia offense, Bill, is run it, including quarterback scrambles, and then chuck it, that's tough to stop, right?
I think so. Like I said earlier in the week, I do think West Virginia maybe rediscovered itself, and I think that's coming. It's coming at a time where like Iowa State has been like average against the run. Like Caleb Johnson ran on them. And they did a nice job of shutting that down in the second half, but it was because they knew that Iowa couldn't throw the ball. This is obviously a different task, so I don't know if they can approach this quite the same way. They're also, as we talked about a few times, like they entered the year really banged up at linebacker. Kel Brazina, who's a freshman who's had to play and start because of that, got hurt last week, and I guess his status is still a bit up in the air. So they could be, if not shorthanded at linebacker, at least not 100% healthy at linebacker. And also, like their big defensive tackle Dominique Orange got hurt against Baylor as well. He came back into the game, but he's got like a shoulder issue, so maybe he's not at 100%. I think maybe Iowa State's defensive front could be, banged up enough that West Virginia is able to run the ball the way it wants to and make this a game. Even if it doesn't really throw the ball, because Iowa State's pass defense has been great. Also hasn't really played many teams that can throw the ball. So this will be a different test for them too. But I think this is a game where like Iowa State throwing it and West Virginia running it are both maybe going to be able to do what they want offensively.
Yeah. Iowa State's defense has allowed 121, 99, 118, and 72 passing yards in the first 4 games, but that was against literally nobody who could throw. Mm-hmm. That was Iowa and North Dakota and Arkansas State and Houston. Like, they can't throw. Sawyer Robertson threw for 258 for Baylor. So that was a little bit of a prep for this, but like, I don't think that's the deal, right? I think, as you just said, it's Iowa State throwing it, West Virginia running it. West Virginia can win.
Yes.
But I'm picking Iowa State. I'm going to pick Iowa State, and I'm just believing in Matt Campbell's like super competent, we're just going to do what we do. 34-23. This to me is like it's close, and then Iowa State gets an extra score at the end to make it a 2-score game. Neil Brown, West Virginia fans are not in love with Neil Brown right now. I think he deserves credit. That staff deserves credit for figuring it out the last couple weeks, but also they weren't ready in week 1. And they said that they were on tilt after blowing the backyard brawl. And they said that, and Matt Campbell and that staff for Iowa State and John Haycock and Tyler Mauser and everybody there, they've just been taking care of business. Landis just absolutely taking care of business. So I expect it to be a great environment in Morgantown, but this is a take care of business kind of win. 133 years, but also focus on today. I have Iowa State 34-23.
I have Iowa State 28-24. I think they're going to really get challenged in this game and perhaps even have to come back to win it.
Okay.
I do think West Virginia will hang, and I don't know. Something about the vibes with Iowa State. I kind of feel like they're on their way to something this year. So like I don't want to pick them to lose, even though I do think West Virginia can win. But this might be, I don't know, when the season's over and Iowa State does whatever it does, maybe the game we look back on and like, man, I can't believe they pulled that win out to kind of send them on a journey to something greater than a Big 12 championship and maybe a playoff berth, right? So I'm rolling with the vibes and picking Iowa State, but I do think it's going to be a pretty close, fun game.
I do think if it's a close game, like, who will find a way to win? How could you not go with Iowa State, given what has happened so far in this season? But West Virginia is quite a wild card. I think West Virginia and Syracuse, if we were, maybe it's, McCord doesn't run. Kyle McCord doesn't run. But just in terms of I don't know, they could look awesome and be impossible to stop, or they could give a game away. Mm-hmm. They might be the top 2 in the North in terms of high ceiling, low floor, lots of potential. Not sure you trust them. Gotta watch them, but don't know what you're going to get, but certainly talented enough to beat good teams when they're on. Are they the top 2?
How did Godfrey describe Vanderbilt illegal fireworks earlier in the week?
Yeah.
That's West Virginia and Syracuse too.
Yeah. No, we should make an illegal fireworks list. Yeah. Yeah. You might have a beautiful show in the sky, or you might blow your hand off. Okay. No, I'll have it. We'll have it on the second screen. We'll have it on the second screen while Ohio State, Oregon's going on. Okay. We have a couple more. That's it for big game breakdowns. You and I are not disagreeing enough. We have not disagreed on this show. We did disagree on Ohio State, Oregon. I don't know if we're going to disagree at all. We have a couple more games to run through quickly, and then we have a dragon statue conversation to have. We'll do all of that next on Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis back on Kings of North. Landis, I will say, so we make a rundown for every show, what we're going to do. I put in the little timing mechanisms where we should be at each part in the show, and we're never on it.
No.
We're always over. We're like 45 seconds under the rundown, and I actually don't like it. I don't like this. I feel much more comfortable when we're 9 to 16 minutes over. We're right on track, and I have a knot in my stomach. I'm like, we're not giving the people enough information. We need to be more over.
I like that we're right on track, so to take us off on track, you complain about how we're on track. It just vamp for 90 seconds about it to write your world.
I don't like it. All right. I guess we'll stay on track. Notre Dame-Stanford, parentheses Doug, parentheses 2 minutes, 3:30, ND minus 23.5. Is that what we want to do? Let's just be rundown robots. Stanford beat Syracuse, but I think Stanford stinks. It makes me mad that Syracuse lost to Stanford.
Yep.
The last 2 weeks, Stanford has lost to Clemson and Virginia Tech by a combined score of 71-21. Their only FBS win is Syracuse. They're 2-3. I'm so mad at Syracuse. Ugh. Notre Dame talking this week that like they kind of just have to run Riley Leonard. That I think they're getting some questions about like,
Clearly,
do you need to protect the quarterback? And they're just like, well, yeah, I don't know what to tell you, brother. Like if we want our offense to be even moderately functional, we need to run Riley Leonard. Carries per game, 12, 11, 11, 12, 11. The only quarterbacks in the Power Four with more rushing attempts than Riley Leonard, Diego Pavia, Bama Slayer, Taylon Green, Tennessee Slayer, and Jalen Milroe. So like the dude is running, but you have talked about it a lot. It's what they have to do. Mike Denbrock, the Notre Dame offensive coordinator, said, we've been average as dirt on first down. So they feel like some of their third down issues because they're not doing enough on first down. I tried to look up their first down stats and stuff like I did. They're not that bad. Their team passer rating on first down is terrible, but like they're running the ball okay on first down. I also think like they maybe trying to find something and they're reverting to the mean, which is use the quarterback as a battering ram and hope you can win each game by 4 points and somehow get to 11-1. And so I have them doing that this week against Stanford, who I think is bad, 27-16 Notre Dame.
Yeah, I think they're going to do the same thing to Stanford, who I also agree is bad. Bad news for Notre Dame. Boubacar Traore, that their really talented young defensive end, is out for the year, and he was already taking over for Jordan Botelho, who's also out for the year. So injuries keep mounting.
Terrible
for Notre Dame. I think Billy Schrauff might come back. Offensive lineman that got hurt against Purdue. I think could play. Christian Gray, who didn't play against Louisville, defensive back, could play in this game. So they're losing guys, they're getting some guys back, but it's been a tough injury situation for Notre Dame. I don't think it matters much in this game because, as we've discussed, Stanford is bad, and Stanford's run defense, while statistically like kind of good, I don't think has seen what it's going to see on Saturday. So Notre Dame runs for a 27-7 win.
Okay, we both have 27. All right, BYU-Arizona, 4 p.m. Eastern. BYU they are favored, right? 3.5 point home favorite in this game against Arizona. What you got?
It's homecoming for BYU.
Hey.
As we discussed earlier in the week, Big Noon is doing a show from there, but also Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt are calling the game. So it is, it's a big deal for BYU. It's a nice showcase spot against a Arizona team who I don't think is very good, but has also at times like been a little annoying to some good teams, right? Beat Utah. Hung with Texas Tech last week, but ultimately lost that game. So like I don't think Arizona is very good. And I think BYU coming off of they were off last week, right? I have that right, don't I?
Yeah.
Off last week. Yeah. So they're rested. I think we probably see BYU put on a nice performance here. Oh, you might disagree with me though. I have BYU winning 38-24. Like Arizona's defense is actually solid, so maybe there's something it can do to slow down BYU's offense, which is dealing with a lot of injuries at running back, which is like I think it's still boom or bust at the quarterback position with Jake Retzlaff, but I think we see more booms. And I think BYU puts its best foot forward here.
Just on alert a little bit. I have a closer game, 26-21 BYU. Like Big Noon is there. It is homecoming. You're feeling great about yourself. Arizona, I don't think is a good team, but they have a dangerous passing combo. Just be on alert. A little bit of a spot, not enough of a spot to pick Arizona, but I'm always on alert for teams that are not traditionally at the top of the sport, having success and handling success. So they've had some time to marinate in their tremendous success. And Noah Fafita and Tetro McMillan might be the exact kind of people to come in and like cram your success right on you. Not enough to win, but just be careful. And I believe in Kalani Sitake. I think he is a very good culture head coach who would be not anywhere near the top of my list of coaches who would allow that to happen. Just be careful. That's all. Utah, Arizona State. It's at Arizona State. This is a Friday night game, a little bit goofy, 10:30 Eastern Friday night. Utah is a 4.5-point road favorite. And as always, the question is, will Cam Rising play? Kyle Whittingham at least acknowledged the idea of I don't exactly know what the question was, but he basically acknowledged if the season gets away from them, they might just play Isaac Wilson no matter what, because the 7th-year guy is going to be done and Isaac Wilson's their future. So they just continued to be in a very tough spot with an injury situation with the quarterback who Cam Rising has warmed up the last 2 weeks. And then not played. They are coming off a bye. Kyle Whittingham said there's a chance that he plays, but reportedly Isaac Wilson took all the reps in practice last week during the bye. So I don't know. And Isaac Wilson started off pretty good and people were excited and people were like, I don't know, he might be better than Cam Rising anyway. And then the last 2 weeks in a win over Oklahoma State and a loss to Arizona, he's completing 53% of his passes. He has 4 picks and has been sacked 5 times. So then they were like, oh, yeah, he's a freshman. He just got out of high school. Maybe the guy who is literally 7 years older than him might be better. So I don't know, man. I'm picking Utah 28-20, but this continues to be something that I think is a football issue for Utah and a non-football issue. And by the way, Arizona State's 4-1. I don't know if they're good, but they're 4-1.
I think they're solid. I think they're dangerous. I think they can win this game. I almost picked Arizona State, if I'm being honest.
Okay.
I picked Utah 20-17 because I still think Utah's got a very good defense, even if the offense is obviously significantly worse without Cam Rising. I find this situation super frustrating. I wish they could just be a little more forthright with what is happening. But I'm just also going to assume we're not going to see Cam Rising until we actually see him. So I think Utah's going to play a lot of tight, probably anxious games without Cam Rising. So I have them playing that kind of game here, but winning 2017.
All right, Syracuse-NC State. This is an 8:00 start at NC State on Saturday. Syracuse is favored by 5 on the road, Landis.
NC State has lost all of its games to Power 4 opponents. It lost to Tennessee, got hammered by Tennessee, lost to Clemson, just lost to Wake Forest. NC State's bad. And
you think they're not going to win the ACC, as some predicted?
I think they're not going to win the ACC. Okay. Probably up there, right, in the conversation for most disappointing team this season. Yeah. Because you were not alone in picking NC State to be a team that could win the ACC.
Is their quarterback still hurt?
Yeah, so Grayson McCall took a really scary hit against Wake Forest. I don't think there's any anticipation that he's going to come back for this game. I guess maybe he could come back this season. But Dave Doran said that was the scariest thing he's ever seen on a football field, the NC State coach. So I guess he's okay coming off of that, but I don't think quite ready to play. So it'll be a backup quarterback. And I'm not trying to down a guy who got injured. Grayson McCall had not been playing that well anyway. So I think with the backup quarterback situation, maybe it's not all that different for NC State, but it's just not a team that's shown a quality to beat power conference opponents yet. And Syracuse has its flaws for sure. But I do think Kyle McCord can probably throw the ball against NC State because he seems like he can throw the ball against anyone. Is there a letdown thing here at all that you're worried about with getting an emotional win at UNLV, then having to come back home across the country to get ready for this game and then go on the road again to NC State? I'm a little worried about that, but I'm still picking Syracuse 35-28.
I'm not sure Syracuse has emotions. I think they're simultaneously, Fran Brown is just a deal with what's in front of you kind of coach. And then also they're just such a nutball offense that they could do anything at any time. Yeah. And they might score 7 touchdowns. They might turn the ball over 5 times. And I don't know that emotion or road or home or anything matters. They found a way to beat Syracuse. They found a way to lose to Stanford. Watch it. We keep saying. So they have to go win this.
They
Like if
should
you
win this
like
game.
they like go win this game. Like I'm not making an excuse for them. I'm just like kind of out of trying to figure them out. Entertaining as all get out, talented. Fran Brown has absolutely reinvigorated Syracuse football, but they're nuts right now. So
They are nuts. They are. It is
They're
interesting to me that they like, even though NC State's bad, Syracuse is favored at a place where it's lost the last 4 times it's gone there. So
yeah, Fran Brown wasn't there for that.
that's true.
Fran's here now. Fran's here. It's all good. All right, this next one, I don't know about this. Cincinnati, UCF. It's at UCF. I'm just trying to look up stuff right now. You know, early in the week, everybody knew a hurricane was coming. The anticipation was that like they'll be okay for it by Saturday at 3:30. As we record this, I don't know that anything has changed in that regard. UCF is a 3-point favorite. Cincinnati, frankly, could very well be 5-0. They blew the game against Pitt and they lost to Texas Tech by 3 last time out. They're 3-2, and like their 2 losses are to teams that are combined 10-1. Pitt's undefeated, and Texas Tech has 1 loss. So like Cincinnati's good. Deshaun Pace is UCF's leading tackler. He played for Cincinnati for 4 years, and now he's a Golden Knight. And Scott Satterfield this week, they're coming off a bye. He said, quote, "We were beat up," and that they had 25 guys on the injury list after the Texas Tech game, and that basically everybody except maybe like 1 guy will be back. That included Corey Kiner, the running back, their great running back, getting hurt in the Texas Tech game, only carried it 3 times for 9 yards. They had other running back injuries and got down to like their 4th guy in that game. But again, Satterfield said they should be back. So I think Cincinnati, like, very, very well-timed bye for them. Best wishes to everybody in Florida. A football game is secondary to all the real life things happening down there. But at the moment, I guess they're playing this, and I'll take Cincinnati on the road 24-17.
Yeah, I actually sent Mike the wrong score. I have UCF winning 31-24, not 20-13. But I think UCF's just going to get back to running the ball the way it struggled to run against Colorado. Again, if Cincinnati can do the same thing and force UCF to throw the ball because it can build a lead or whatever, then I like Cincinnati's chances. But that rushing attack is so potent. I have a hard time seeing it getting like shut down or taken out of the game for 2 weeks in a row.
Okay. Minnesota-UCLA. This is a 9 p.m. Eastern start on Saturday. It's at UCLA. Minnesota is favored by 5, Landis.
Minnesota is favored by 5 and emboldened by their antidote of confidence. Did you see what PJ Fleck was talking about? Yeah.
Would, you know what? I was going to say that I would like an antidote of confidence, but actually I probably need like an antidote of a little humbleness. I'm kind of good on confidence.
Yeah. So whatever the antidote of confidence capsule is, Minnesota took it after losing to Michigan before upsetting USC. So I guess it worked. I don't know if they're going to do it before traveling out west to UCLA this weekend. UCLA played a different quarterback against Penn State. Justin Martin was actually pretty good. It was interesting. Like James Franklin, after Penn State beat UCLA, says, "I think UCLA found a quarterback," which is just like, well, they had one.
It's kind of mean.
Ethan Garbers was playing, but not super effective. I actually thought Justin Martin looked pretty good too. So I guess Minnesota could be dealing with a little more athleticism or perhaps some big play potential at UCLA's quarterback position. Like I did, like Minnesota like really needs this game, right? Like to build off of the USC win to show a little something about the program. UCLA is a pretty bad team, I think. This is a game where I think because the teams are a little more evenly matched, maybe the travel thing matters perhaps a bit more. Minnesota also coming off of a pretty emotional win, as we've said. So like I have Minnesota winning 20-13, but I think it could be a little bit of a sleepy kind of game.
I have Minnesota 26-17. And again, if the Gophers are the reinvigorated Gophers, they got to go take care of business here. Yeah. I can see, watch for this when Deshaun Foster and PJ Fleck do the little coaches talk to each other in the pregame. Try to read lips. And if Deshaun Foster says, "Hey, do you have any more of those confidence pills? Like we could use some of those if you have some extra." So they're just jelly beans, right? Are they just jelly beans?
I don't know. They were capsules that contained Sprite, I guess. I don't know what they were doing.
Oh, it gives you a little tickle then on the way down. Yeah, a little tickle on the way down. That's the confidence. Hey, coach, what's that tickle on the way down? Oh, that's the confidence working. You know who else had some confidence pills? Dumbo. and that elephant could fly. Cram it game. I don't really like this idea anymore. We started doing a cram it game because we wanted to at least acknowledge the South exists. Mm-hmm. But I kind of don't want to acknowledge the South exists. Should we skip it? I don't know. LSU, Ole Miss. Do we have to pretend that this matters? Does it matter? Does it matter?
We need Ole Miss to lose. I think we need to embrace Kentucky Fried Brian Kelly for a week, or Foghorn Leghorn Brian Kelly, and get a win here for LSU.
Okay, we'll take that. We're both picking LSU. It's at LSU. LSU is a home dog. People are so enamored with Ole Miss and Jackson Dart that LSU is a home dog in the greatest probably home environment in college football. You noted this to me the other day. LSU is 108-15 this century in night games at Tiger Stadium. This is a night game at Tiger Stadium. I don't know that Ole Miss is the team to go in there and not be number 109. Jackson Dart is number 2 among quarterbacks in PFF rating among Power 4 quarterbacks. Garrett Nussmeier at LSU is number 13. I don't really even want anyone watching this to know who Jackson Dart and Garrett Nussmeier are. Jackson Dart, 13 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Garrett Nussmeier, 15 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Ole Miss is weird. Ole Miss still hasn't had a bye. So, this is their 7th straight game. And they're going to go in and beat LSU? Are you freaking drunk? Give me Brian Kelly, 31-24.
Ole Miss is 1-7 in its last 8 games on the road against ranked opponents. It's just I think just opponents maybe on the road, but it must be ranked opponents. Anyway, LSU is going to win. I have 45-42. Shootout. As we call it.
Yeah. Not good. Exciting. Not good. Don't watch it. It's Saturday night. Watch Ohio State, Oregon, and Iowa State, West Virginia. I swear, if I come to your house, you better have a 4-box. If LSU Ole Miss is on, it better be in a 4-box, and it better be number 4 in your 4-box.
It will be.
You're going to have some explaining to do.
Yeah, I always go main game on the TV up here in front of me, secondary game actually on my computer, and then I just have a quad box or whatever else is available on the TV behind me. So I do have I have 3 screens, and sometimes I even get out the iPad and I'll 4-screen it.
Yeah, no, I've computer, iPad. I do computer, iPad, 4-box on the TV. So we're watching you. No, I don't think I'm talking to anybody. There's nobody watching this who's like, but I really want to watch LSU Ole Miss. Those people don't watch Kings of the North. Okay.
I'm going to check it out because I'm going to bet the over in this game.
Oh, nice. Okay, that's fine. I'm going to cash my Ole Miss will not make the playoff ticket right after they get their doors blown off by Foghorn Leghorn Brian Kelly. Last game is our G5 game. You asked me to switch this. I had a different game because I had at least one Northern team in it, but you made us talk about James Madison, Coastal Carolina for some reason. Why?
It's an important game, I think, in the G5 playoff conversation. Whoever wins this game will be, I think, in the driver's seat in the Sun Belt East, and then a chance to win that league. And I'm just keeping an eye on it for our Boise State Army and Navy brethren. All right.
Okay.
We're just watching them. But I also wanted to make you talk about Tim Beck, who was the head coach at Coastal Carolina. So that's all. It's an interesting G5 game for the playoff race. I think a little bit. But I got James Madison winning 35-31.
I have 34-20 James Madison at 7:30 on Saturday night. Don't watch it. JMU is favored by 9.5. Oh, it is Thursday? Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. Do I have to watch it then because it's the only thing on?
You can watch the NFL if you want.
Oh, yeah. Who's playing in the NFL? Do you know? Are the Birds playing?
No, okay. I don't know who's playing.
All right. So those are our picks this week. We only disagree on one game, plus the Oregon-Ohio State game we disagreed on. So we disagree on Cincinnati-UCF. So we'll see if Landis can make up some ground in the Dragon Statue race. The race for the Dragon Statue, it's our fantasy picks each week. We pick a Northern quarterback and a Northern skill player. Once you pick a guy, you cannot use him again the rest of the season. The winner of the week gets the Dragon Statue to live in their office for the week. And so it was in Bill's possession last week. And let's roll tape to find out who has it now. Look at my new friends. The dragon and Mr. Rogers are friends in my house now because the dragon lives with me again. Hello, little dragon. Hello, my little baby dragon. How did I win the dragon back, Landis? Oh, it's okay. It's okay.
Oh, how? Because we both picked Eli Holstein, and I was a gentleman who let you keep Eli Holstein, and then I switched to Garrett Green. I would have lost either way. Because I got destroyed this week. You had Eli Holstein and Jeremiah Smith, who got you 58.1 points, and I had Garrett Green, who had a nice week. He got me 20 points. And then Omari Evans at Penn State got me 0.8 points because he had one catch for 3 yards against UCLA. So I just overthought it. I got what I deserved by picking Omari Evans. So no more of that. No more going off the board trying to be clever. We're only making very obvious picks now.
Okay. I did go through this week and I sort of went through like all the best receivers and running backs and quarterbacks in the North and who I've used and who I haven't used and who I have to make sure I use in the future. Like, I really want the dragon to live with me, because what we're not going to do is we're not going to put Mr. Rogers on the table, because that's just not how it rolls. Mr.
I was going to
Rogers
ask, how do I get Mr. Rogers? Yeah.
Yeah. So that will be, we'll have to figure that out. You're prying from my cold dead hands, frankly, is how you get Mr. Rogers. Our picks this week, I think you were on alert again, potentially. Let's go to Bill's picks first. Were you worried that you and I were going to pick the same quarterback again?
I was, yeah. I'm going with Avery Johnson against Colorado. I think he'll run it. I think he'll throw it. I think he'll have a nice game building off of a good performance his last time out. And then, like I said, no more surprise off the radar picks. We're going with Emeka Egbuka, Ohio State receiver, against Oregon. He is the most targeted player in Ohio State's offense. He had 3 touchdowns last week, which just makes me a little nervous. But I think he'll have a nice game against Oregon too, and maybe even get some rushing production on top of his receiving production. So Avery Johnson and Emeka Egbuka are my guys this week.
Okay, 2 big games. I did not consider Avery Johnson. I have on my list of guys I want to use eventually, but I was between Luke Altmaier of Illinois and Jake Retzlaff of BYU this week for my quarterback, and I am taking Jake Retzlaff. Okay. He's thrown 12 touchdown passes this year, which is, I think, in the top 5 among Northern quarterbacks. As you noted, he is a little boom bust, but I think he can boom. And so I think like 250 and 3 touchdowns against Arizona. If they have to get, I didn't have a super high scoring game for my pick. You had actually a higher scoring game for BYU, but if they have to get a little bit of a shootout with Noah Fafita, I think that's okay. So I'll take Jake Retzlaff in that. And then I was very much between 2 guys. I almost took DJ Giddens from Kansas State, the running back there, but I really wanted to play Jalen Noel. And so Jalen Noel, the Iowa State receiver, against this West Virginia secondary that we've talked about having some issues. He only has 2 touchdowns this year. Jaden Higgins has been more of the touchdown guy, but I just think against that West Virginia secondary, there's a chance for Jalen Noel, who has 451 receiving yards and is excellent and was on this show at Big 12 Media Days, to have a really big game, maybe get some more touchdowns on the board. So I'll take Retzlaff and Noel for my picks. What do you think of those?
Good picks. The matchup, I think, is a nice one for Noel there for Iowa State. So Retzlaff does scare me because, he can throw some picks, but he'll run too, which is like a big part of this. If you can get a quarterback that you can get some rushing production, that was a big part. Like Eli Holstein, threw it well, but I think he also had 76 rushing yards last week too. Yeah. So that's a nice boost if you can get it.
All right. We wanted to keep the dragon statue with Daddy, so we'll see what happens. Thanks as always to our producer, Mike Yorstowski, for making us look good and sound good. We will see you Friday morning. Bets of the North. Tishu and I had a bad betting week. Our Ohio State Iowa bet did not. It was horrible. And we could make excuses. Oh, we bet a first half team total that was 23.5, and it was 7-0 at halftime. And then Ohio State went nuts in the second half, and they were over 23.5 in the second half, but it didn't work at all. So we take the blame for that. And we also didn't hit our upset pick. So 2 losses last week. We're still up, but we're trying to get it back. We're trying to get the ball rolling again on Bets of the North. That's Friday morning. And then Saturday, 11 p.m. Eastern, or when the Oregon-Ohio State game is over or in hand. We will see you there for about an hour-long post-game show. Ohio State, Oregon, West Virginia, Iowa State, Washington, Iowa, Rutgers-Wisconsin, right, Landis? We're going to have Pitt-Cal. We're going to have a lot of really good games to talk about, and we hope you guys join us for that one. For now, he's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.